We'll now go to our next speaker. The next speaker is Erik Lee. Erik Lee is the founding editor of LabourStart. If you're familiar with LabourStart, you would be familiar with the motto, which is written at the top of the web page. So where trade unionists, LabourStart, where trade unions start their day on the net. And that's really true. Not just trade unionists, but lots of people. Anybody wanting to be in touch with a huge community of activists, labor activists, and people fighting for justice. That is an amazing source, an amazing network, and Erik Lee has founded this, and we are really delighted to have Erik at this conference. And I should also mention Erik Lee has been supporting the workers' strikes and struggles in Iran and in many other countries for many years, and also he's a signatory to the international campaign for the political boycott of the regime in Iran, which Peter also referred to. And we are delighted to have Erik with us. And Erik, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much for that. Very kind words. And thank you for inviting me to participate in this very important event. The Islamic Republic of Iran is a clerical fascist regime. It is essentially no different from the fascist regimes we know from history. Mussolini's Italy, Franco's Spain, and most infamously, Hitler's Germany. It is a regime that has no claim to legitimacy, as it does not rule with the consent of its people. It rules by terror and terror alone. In 1933, shortly after Hitler came to power, he crushed the German trade union movement and set up a state-controlled labor front instead. Only a few days after his thugs seized control of union buildings and jailed trade unionists, the International Labor Conference convened in Geneva. This conference, which is the decision-making body of the International Labor Organization, the ILO, is filled with representatives of governments, employers, and trade unions. That year, the Germans attempted to seat the delegation from the newly created State Labor Front. The international trade union movement united to fight against this. While governments, including the British government, had no objection to Hitler's Nazis being seated at the conference, the trade unionists blocked the seating of the so-called worker delegates from Germany. As the leader of the French trade unions said at the time, jailers never have the right to represent prisoners. The entire German delegation was forced to return to Berlin, and the country withdrew from the ILO later that year. As a recent book put it, the ILO was the first international organization to refuse recognition to the Nazi dictatorship. And this was done through the workers' group of the ILO without relying on governments or employers. Which brings me to the present day. The ILO still exists. The International Labor Conference still convenes every June in Geneva. And every year, the clerical fascist regime in Iran sends a delegation of so-called workers' representatives to take their seats as part of the workers' group. These delegates do not represent the workers. They represent the regime. They are today, as were the German delegates back in 1933, jailers being given the right to represent prisoners. This cannot continue. I believe the time has come to launch a massive grassroots campaign in the world's trade unions to demand that the workers' group in the ILO, which is dominated by unions affiliated to the International Trade Union Confederation, repeat now what our comrades did back in 1933. We must demand that the Iranian regime free all political prisoners and recognize the rights of workers to join and form trade unions of their own choosing, to strike and to bargain collectively. Until that happens, the regime must not be given legitimacy and its so-called worker representatives must be turned away. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Eric. And I'll just go through some of the points that you raised in Farsi. اریک لی که بنیانگزار سایت لیبر استارت، نکته اولش این بود که جمهوری اسلامی، باید ما بپذیریم که جمهوری اسلامی یک رژیم فاشیست اسلامیه و هیچ مشروعیتی نداره از طرف مردم، فقط با ترور حکمرانی میکنه و میگه که اگه از نظر مقایسه تاریخی بکنیم، هیتلر و نازی‌ها هم همین کار رو کردن و اونا وقتی به قدرت رسیدن اولین کارهاشون این بود که اتحادیه‌های کارگری رو در هم بشکنن و به جاش یک جبهه‌ای یا نهادی گذاشتن به نام استیت لیبر فرانت، یه جبهه دولتی کار اسمش بخوایم ترجمه کنیم. و کاری که اونا کردن با اعتراض اتحادیه‌های کارگری در سراسر دنیا مواجه شد و اتحادیه کارگری در فرانسه مثلا اینطور توصیف کردن، گفتن که زندانبانان نمیتونن نماینده زندانیان باشه، کسی که زندانبانه نمیتونه نمایندگی بکنه زندانی رو و بر این مبنا خواستن که آیلو، سازمان جهانی کار، که اینا رو راه نده در اونجا و آیلو، سازمان جهانی کار، اولین سازمانی شد که به دیکتاتوری نازیستا نگفت و اونا رو راه نداد و میگه امروز آیلو هنوز سر کاره، سازمان جهانی کار سر کاره و اتفاق مشابهی داره اتفاق میفته. جمهوری اسلامی، رژیم فاشیست اسلامی، داره نمایندگان خودش و هیئت نمایندگی خود دولت رو میفرسته به اونجا، مثل سال 1933 که وقتی که رژیم هیتلر این کارو کرد. و کاری که باید ما بکنیم وقتمون رسیده که همون شعار رو بدیم که بازجو یا زندانبان نمیتونه نماینده زندانی باشه و باید همون کاری بکنیم که رفقای ما در اتحادیه کارگری سال 1933 انجام دادن و جلوی حضور اونها را در سازمان جهانی کار بگیریم. و این نکات اصلی اریک لی بود که اینجا بیان کردم و همونطور که من اشاره کردم، اریک لی از امضا کنندگان کمپین برای بایکوت جمهوری اسلامی و خواهان اخراج جمهوری اسلامی از نهادهای بین‌المللی و به طور ویژه سازمان جهانی کار. خیلی تشکر میکنم از اریک لی. Thank you, Eric, for those words.